Kia ora. Today, on Sunday, we will dedicate our new organ, the refurbished and enhanced organ, to the glory of God. It's an old phrase, somewhat pious and well misused. For many of the atrocities in Christian history, invading lands, subjugating people, destroying religions and places of worship, was said to be for the glory of God, as were the supposed divine endorsements the Church endowed upon monarchs and other forms of unaccountable governance, and upon armies and warships and the like. Still today, the phrase can be wheeled out by those in power, those church leaders in bed with power, like Patriarch Kirill and Vladimir Putin, to justify all sorts of crimes, misdemeanors, and acts of self-aggrandizement. So it's a phrase, if to be used at all, to be used carefully and judiciously, and seldom. It's also, though, a phrase that points to a greater intent and purpose than merely naming some building or project, or in our case an organ, after a significant persons or donor or donors, or merely celebrating the success of a community or the combined will of a denomination. That is not to say that people aren't significant, that those who offer leadership and wisdom aren't significant, or that those who donate and give of their time, money and energy aren't significant. And it's not to say that completing projects, celebrating successes, and the combined will of denominations are not important. But to the glory of God points beyond ourselves. It points beyond our needs and wants. It points towards some of those big words that we use to try to give substance to God. Words like compassion and grace, justice, mutuality. The purpose of any building, project or organ is to give voice to what I call the music of God, namely the divine love lyrics expressed in compassion, grace, justice and mutuality. And the music of God, and how this metaphor works, is that we are invited in all our wonderful variety, abilities, failings, to participate in this music of God, kind of like a big concert. And the purpose of this concert, or we in concert, is to bring more beauty, more joy, more hope to the world. We know something of the power of music, how it can bring happiness and serenity, how it can bring people together and be recharged by that togetherness, how it can reach down deep inside us, nestling beside our heart and nourishing our soul. But we also know, shockingly so, that the same music that brings us much joy has in times past, and probably still in times present, been enjoyed by and savoured by tyrants and murderers and destroyers of life and all who don't fit within their ideal. So let's not think that music is enough, or that all music brings wisdom and love in its wake, or that music and what I'm calling the music of God necessarily equate. Let us remember too the words of the Hebrew prophets, like Hosea, I desire mercy, not sacrifice. And 2nd Isaiah, is this not the fast that I want, to loose the bonds of injustice, to let the oppressed go free? These prophets are criticizing worship. That's what sacrifices and fasting allude to. They're criticizing worship that does not translate into actions. Their echo is criticizing our worship too, our singing of hymns, prayers, sermons, organ voluntaries. Our worship that does not translate into actions. Actions of mercy, justice, and in the words of our gospel reading today, good news to the poor. To make music in concert with the music of God is to let worship inspire us to action, and action to worship, and worship to resolve to bring change. Those actions are to be just, to be kind, to be creative, and to dream and work for a world where this is the language and bread and reality for all people and creatures. So to dedicate something to the glory of God can be like asking for a holy critic to perch like a parrot on our shoulder and continually ask, for whose glory is this? Are you doing what you're doing so others will think well of you? Are you doing what you're doing so that your membership and finances will increase? Are you doing what you're doing so people will come and hear and listen and think, wow? Maybe like Robert Louis Stevenson's parrot, Captain Flint. The critic will squawk, time to go about. Time to stand by, to change our direction and head into that music of God. To change course, to passion, to justice, to grace, to mutuality. All of which invite us to participate and act. While the relationship, as I mentioned, between the power of music and the power of goodness is not causal, there is often a correlation. Just as there's often a correlation between those who create and make beauty and the power of goodness. Just as there can be a correlation between those who bend their knees to play with small children or animals and the power of goodness. For music, creativity and play are, amongst other things, spiritual practices that can open our heart and lead us deeper into God, if we let them. We've also ordained and commissioned today new members, elders, to our parish council, and pray that they might have grace, vision and wisdom, all of which are needed. So too is courage. If the course ahead is a repetition of the past, then courage might not be called upon so much. But I suspect it won't be a repetition and will be called upon. For around the bend comes the unexpected and the expected, some of which might be frightening, even hurtful, some of which will be wonderful, even if it's really different. Courage is closely aligned with my understanding of faith, about following the prompting of your heart and in concert with others engage in what is sometimes seems counterintuitive behavior. There's a parable told by Pete Rollins about a disciple who had given his life to follow the teaching and example of his master. The disciple never deviated from those received disciplines and practices. Yet towards the end of his life, the master lamented that the disciple had betrayed the teachings he had received. For the disciple had not perceived that to follow rigorously the teaching and example of the past was to fail to respond and initiate creatively, faithfully in the present. Wisdom is not something that is unchanging, but is something that is discovered afresh in each time and circumstance. What worked well in the past might not work well in the present. What wise teaching guided us in the past might not guide us well in the present. That is why to participate in the music of God is to find afresh in each time and circumstance how compassion, grace, justice, and mutuality might be lived and expressed in action. To use an American football analogy, there is no playbook to determine our moves. And certainly it's not the Bible. For the disciple to have learnt well and be faithful to his master, he would have developed an intuitive spiritual sense of smell. Sometimes you catch a whiff of a scent, something you can't see, can't even visualize, but smells interesting and alluring, and you follow your nose. Even if this leads you round bends and into places that you or your teachers or your friends have never been. Even if this brings you to a place where you find yourself at odds with teachers and friends, with your understanding of faith to date. Even if this sense of smell leads you to what looks like an abyss. That's why we need courage. Blessed is a world where the music of God is expressed in justice. Justice is guided by love, and love gifted unconditionally. Blessed is a world where with courage, kindness, and grace we join together and create this great concert of hope. Amen.